Hello. There is a Leahy family involved with multiple courts, judges, prosecutors, and their family members. I never had a word of conversation with them. I had one word. Sarcastically, one guy was bending his body, contorting his body near me. I believe it's the father of Brendan Leahy with the same name. They have women, I believe it might have his father and his grandmother working there, like the whole, and his wife. There are more than one people named Brendan Leahy. They have lawyers and they have a relationship with UConn and with the colleges they graduated from and things like that. In other words, UConn's a great campus. All campuses are great, but all ages and natures of campus. They had replaced, for example, what James Madison had declassified for his communications and for that of our founders, which the only one they had the security to have declassified for us is James Madison. And they were all using his plan, but they have that replaced. So they're attacking. They have worse than criminal incompetence, collusion slash S too, with black pupils, whites of eyes, replacing what our founders left declassified for us to communicate. They communicated about how there was a breaching method that had everyone reassigned communications with nature communicates with black pupils, whites of eyes, showing us that there are fish with two eyes, there are birds with two eyes, distinctly but non-distinctly, and simultaneously, but showing us to define, to discern there's a further distinct identity of simultaneous nature involved here. It is generating totally different individual species, bodies. And each one of those species, birds, fish, they are each made up of a whole bunch of individual bodies. And it shows us where how it's generating all group differences, or it demonstrates if we're generating group differences through and as any system tactical ulterior from its any system ulterior than its own, let alone tactically ulterior from its own, slash hyper-tactically, because where the tactical part is, it did that through ourselves to hide the hyper-tactical. For example, even though it's not discerned, nature's demonstrating it that way. Nature demonstrates to us in the past too, non-distinctly, totally different colonies, more than 13, more than England was involved with slavery, entrenched northern colonies, southern colonies. The only reason there's most of the problems with this syntactically debates, oh, that's your opinion, because they faked what our founders said about it. They were founders framed, and our founders are distinct from our presidents. You guys are not allowing people to be honest about, or even other people to be honest about George Washington's extortion. And we were directed by George Washington. That was his motivations in his syntax. Where at the same time, there had only been remembered international companies and countries involved even with things like slavery. Every single human difference, women, kids, appreciated through and as systems tactically slash hyper tactically ulterior from its own. All, all motivations, nature's needs, interest, hyper additional from that one that no one wanted collusion with, but no one had a choice. And more, everyone's self value rolls with that. Well, it's not our thing, you know what I mean? But then they're going to speak with passions and emotions and jump in other people's conversations dishonestly. So, FBI Director Robert Luskin and multiple courts, judges, and their family members retired and standing. They have collusion slash S with intelligence families at next to networks and exceptions exploited that way. And the differences of guilt of intelligence at the networks or next to them. They have rules with Russia and Ukraine, with the Peruta family, with the fire departments. It's proof that it's tied to nuclear. It is anyway, besides the ways that everything's tied to nuclear. Because the breaching method, everything's tied to the breaching method, which tactically denatured everything. There are houses that were built before America's founders that were born that are still standing, and they still have replaced what our founders had declassified to be their communications and to be for our own, to not read the words of the people at the time, leaving out this out. And James Madison's plan, which had to force everyone to lie about their actual motivations because it was against the laws and the rules of overt criminal enterprises, private ones, the three branches of government. We're supposed to understand and appreciate why and how there's a witch trials place next to Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum, where George Washington had to come with James Madison's plan to meet with a French general right before the last battle of the Revolutionary War, which they're still using that truth for a lie, that it was about fighting England. And they're having self-value rules with that, with people with the natures of debate, sensing for the breaching method too, not even realizing. All exceptions they know about, like with it's because it's the same thing in other countries. There's a YouTube video of Vladimir Putin being interviewed by Tucker Carlson. In Russia and in America, the suburbs look almost exactly alike. And while they were being tortured, extorted, and fact treating nature enslaved, and internationally monitored conversations, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists, sensing everyone staying, roles with use/s of those criminally foreign influence, fact treating nature, quality aspects in the nature A through Z. When there's any one of those things going along. That breaching method against Native Americans, to understand it, you have to understand it's the same exact one that had been applied against every modern country. They were just last to fall. As the human species body of individual bodies, science by that which is generating all group differences, because it's not the other species' bodies, it's not ours, but it's all things anyway. We are distinct from them, we are non-distinct from them, we are simultaneous with them. There's a further distinct identity of simultaneous nature here, a part of what's being presented to us. And pantheism is about this, because it also shows how it is functional, being hyper invisible, has a relationship to itself, an identity, a relationship to itself, that which is generating these things. That is hyper invisible, but still discernible. Distinctly from another identity, a relationship that it has to itself. That is invisible, but still discernible. And this is bound with physics and the quality of diffusion of a third too, bound, because the parts of its complete identity come with where we could, like, there's that one identity of value progression generating totally different species bodies. And note how the human species body of individual bodies is the only one hyper criminally foreign influenced. Not just criminally foreign influenced / hyper criminally foreign influenced. I am not a lawyer. Many ways, thank God, because they'll help us. Because every individual, including them, though, they know that this things are wrong. But when they go to address it, they're trying to entertain, we'll be practical the way they learned it, which is not practical. They have collusion / S and worse than criminal incompetence, defending the identity of any of those types. There's a whole bunch of different police forms at the same time, with former director of the F.B.I., Robert Luskin, former standing chairperson on the Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, involved with changing and faking digital evidences, all kinds of legal scams and collusions, and hiding what is actually recorded, involved with the people at Harvard Hospital, including there are people that they implied. It may look like they're trying to establish undercover, like unmarked intelligence. A whole bunch of people tied to a Kevin Dillon and acting professors from Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, are involved with the founding locations in Old Wethersfield, with WTNH, also with the F.B.I. and with WFSB. They faked conversations with me with WFSB. Harvard Hospital has foreign and domestic medical families, also with other triages, interstates and international. And they've been attaching kids other than their own to faked and changed They just put fake transcripts when people are out of place, and they're just faking what's recorded. All of a sudden, there's a transcript, nothing recorded. In other words, and no one's watching them because there's collusion with that use/s, and people want to have defend their title, the worth of it, in the nature of debate. Where if they try to defend that, it says rules where they're defending notions that can't defend their nature of debate, their fact, true nature, quality, aspects of nature, and afford to be, let alone to protract anyone with short words with convictions proper for James Madison and for our founders plural, let alone how the Native Americans are involved with this, even the ones that didn't know about that plan. Because even the president/chiefs, there are proofs that they don't know about the plan, even though it's recorded and known. So everyone used, this is evidence. This is what was said. They left about there, and plus, we have black people's whites of eyes to discern the worth of that of those surface syntax and motivations narratives. The breaching method had everything to do with their motivations, not a T-tax. They had to lie about how James Madison forced everyone at the same time to become a unity. Not because they didn't trust each other. They shouldn't trust each other because no one was capable of it. Everyone had already been sustained roles hurting everyone else. Everyone had also been sustained roles countering such things and defending that also as collusion/s. The breaching method to keep itself screened, its identity of relationship to itself, our identity of relationship to itself, that nature shows us, keeping it from our discernment by keeping collusion/us with criminally foreign influence / hyper-criminally foreign influence, criminal insidiousness, natures of positive and negative treatments, and identity in our names and value or value treatment simultaneously. So like sequence shifts, self-value, World Trade Center, with a whole bunch of people with the World Trade Center attack, have had roles planting fake exceptions, fake ties, fake nature ties, by timing where people are going to be. All ages of there are only 3 branches of government in a whole bunch of different countries, overt criminal enterprises and private ones. They were facilitated by a hyper-foreign. That which was beyond the nature of order, they have only heard spoken because it has been hyper-additional collusions. Defenses of identities through systems tactical ulterior from the one generating individual species bodies of individual bodies. So it is also next to Fox Connecticut News in Hartford, Connecticut, which is not far from the state capitol. Like it's a little house to skip there. And right next to Fox Connecticut News are a bunch of people who have roles with all sides of criminal and civil cases, and the interbranch and foreign at the same time, and intelligence the same thing. And with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, even when they're not in those cases, their families have time collusion/us too. In other words, increasingly, the state judicial branch and corrections offices then further hyper-additionally, where are used remotely. And now, these are also people next to the campuses, intercities. And one of the things all the collusions are manifest with a whole bunch of identity theft, fraud, slander styles, like the white charge and the black charge, and the cultural charge and the religious charge. Opinion natures only allowed heard or we are sensed. Because then you were being hateful. They're sequence shifting. They have sick people into every religion, and where everyone speaks through other. Remember, groupthink was a part of the World Trade Center attack. I recorded how that's forced. They're forcing people to speak as a group about conversations while they're faking. It's a whole bunch of crime methods with the multiple police stations with the same house and multiple courts and their family members. Further involved with the principal child abuser And what I caught them doing with wire crime acts and methods and predicate acts methods at next to each campus I went to. Valley Crest Street has a DeMoro family that sought me out. I never sought them out. And I recorded them with on and off campuses, collusions with predicate acts with facts. And before the World Trade Center attack, I had started recording this, how this is recorded. Intercities, interstates, in many countries that next to the campuses have been shared. They've been, a bunch of intelligence people and on and off the judicial branch offices and the corrections offices in Wethersfield, Connecticut. They have and have had collusion /S at all ages and natures of campuses, and then shown needs to hide that at the same time with a whole bunch of different countries. And they have methods of predicate acts with location /S uses as one of the things that unites the people involved with our side and people from Saudi Arabia. That Mendez, that in the form of pretending he had a conversation with me, I never had a word of conversation with him ever in my life. Mendez, who walked by me when I was in high school one time and smiled at me once or twice. And the timing of it, they're doing cover-ups. These are people increasingly involved with them. There's also the news pretended with the Wethersfield police that I had conversations with them and ties to them at the Wethersfield police station that weren't at all there or anyplace else. As a kid, now as an adult. And while I caught them forcing a principal child abuser, they attached me to fake conversations about the World Trade Center attack. They have a whole bunch of doctors and different campuses at the same time with this Leahy family. There's also people with the name Harris. I never had a word of conversation with a Kevin Harris. He's involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, planting evidences with some judges and prosecutors and people with the agencies, plural. And Wethersfield police involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and people putting fake things in databases at kids' campuses, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, sequence shifts, like a Rick Sanfaglione with little grammar school kids. Whether I never even see them around campus, they try to make fake exceptions and then pretend people know each other. They do things like have a fire drill and someone will say time that, and you don't even know that person. You don't even respond. Then those people pretend they know you. Then as a certain type of victim, then they'll hurt them if they don't keep things left out about that. Oh, but that's the past. Everyone wants to go back and look at the past, honestly. That's one of the things that's recorded too. I've been asking you guys every day. You can't call the police. I already caught them recorded using wire crime acts and methods, changing and faking phone transcripts, changing and faking transcripts to pretend someone was at their location and tied to people that weren't at all. They do all kinds of things like that to use all ages and natures to cover up. How the breaching method shows them had collusions with the breaching method. They have to hide how they used and value use of every age and nature of investigation investigated their campuses. Collusion /S with what no one wanted collusion /S with. From off locations, but then hyper additionally. It makes exceptions. And they don't want it with that either, but they have no choice. That's why, because it wouldn't be that way if you guys would follow mandated law regarding. I was one of the people next to the World Trade Center towers the morning before it. The World Trade Center has rules with investigators involved with triaging fake intelligence across the country, and their roles with a whole bunch of different countries at the campuses. A bunch of people from Trinity College have roles with people from Harvard Hospital named Mark Violet and Brendan Leahy and his father, Brendan Leahy. They have women in their family that work there. People with the name Lombardo. They're involved with sexual and medical offenders from other areas and then planting evidences on all sides of the kids' houses. Other natures of organized crimes at the same time. That's why and how relative to how it's recorded how the women judges have motivations to self-value. He right when they didn't self-value it. Everyone speaking through other groupthink is being forced. They should be honest. But former director of the F.B.I, Robert Luskin, I didn't know his name yet, but he's involved with a bunch of different courts from the Britain Superior Court, Harper Courts, and the Connecticut's District Court with people before the World Trade Center attack that have affected requests for help from me. People, the intelligence community involved with the intelligence community involved with the I forgot what point I was on. Somebody hit the door. But in other words, get them on paper. Please get me someone to respond. Judge Napolitano, I've asked him many times. And you can see that people are fishing for any truth to use for a lie, any lie, to prevent anyone from demonstrating what's actually the value of what's recorded in databases. In other words, they can't afford the readings of statutes as they are actually recorded as value to be discerned regarding the difference. Oh, but because that was typed on this and this is what the statute says. They're out of their minds. Originally still black pupils. We have black pupils' rights of eyes to discern such. How a breaching method reassigned nature's communication with such. That's hyper evidential. We're going to appreciate the hyper evidential black people. We have to force mandated law followed correctly. And a bunch of prisons and the state corrections offices and judicial branch offices and Sandy Hook prison there has roles people with the name O'Brien and Collusion, further with an upskirt nature principal and a serial killer and people next to his body dumping spot. And the courts with organized crimes at such locations, then they can't go back and be honest. They have to pretend they're against the person. They have torture to keep their mouth shut. They play the Sandy Hook has collusions with a principal child abuser to force him before he was in the prison. Then they have to do that to torture him to keep his mouth shut. The state judicial branch offices has a bunch of courts involved with a principal being, with digital crimes with kids, with wire crimes, predicate acts with Wethersfield police chiefs retired, and people on my street from other areas that brought up the campus's names involved with it, including the name Scalora, increasingly involved with people named DeMoro and Collusion that made confessions tied to the name Scalora, and their roles also with federal evidences crimes, identity theft, fraud, slanders with Wethersfield police, and people associated with the FBI director Robert Luskin, like a Don LeConte, and people with the name DeMoro on Valleycrest Street in Wethersfield, increasingly involved with organized crimes with police and putting fake things in records, sequence shifts, fake motivation screening. They have foreign and domestic medical families. These are people involved with the businesses and houses next to campuses. And conjunctive to that, involved with all kinds of, fake transcripts, all kinds of collusions from off campuses, and then hyper additionally on that. This is where, relative to that part that we're going to discern relative to the black people's rights of eyes, means to discernment. In other words, where everyone has collusions where they don't want them, and where there are exceptions that appear to be their motivations for wanting it anyway. They don't want that either. But they're using that to hide because that was propagated, their motivations. Each age and nature of fact-treating nature had and has other communicated to us by nature itself about the value of the identity of the people, the sciences, or the identity of the counters to them. They are still collusion/S. Vaccines. I teach us things. Please follow mandated law for the World Trade Center attack roles that they're offensively preventing me. Please help networks. It's not that you guys are pretending it's personal not to not help them. That's the whole thing too. All you have to do is help me. Get them on paper. Get me off the fake transcripts of these people at the hospital too, as ones involved personally and professionally with multiple courts, with people involved with proven child abuse leader case years apart, people involved with the elderly homes at the same time, involved with on and off campuses connected, untimely death at Trinity College, even if that was made up, involved with all kinds of other federal crimes, organized crimes at the same time, whole bunch of names that know my name and tried to pretend that it ties to me in between campuses. I had conversations with the leaders of my schools at each of my schools behind my back that were involved with, all brought up at the same time too. And their exploitation of it, fake. They're stacking predicate acts with facts, collusions, and then shown their needs to hide that and their actual motivations for it. There are more people with Valley Crest and conjunctive to it too, involved with them with that. And they know my name. I don't even know their name. They two of them tried to fake the other. John DeMoro has overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and sexual and medical offenders of kids, confessions, and confirmation roles about that with a fifth grade teacher I have, who I never had a conversation with. He told me to follow the maze of a Joe DeMoro. And he increasingly is a guy, Mr. Peruzzi, and his family was brought up by the intelligence various ways at Central Connecticut State University, which was also confirmations of confessions people made before I was in fifth grade, even knew who he was. And I remember I was so happy that he didn't get killed going up, because I wanted him to go up into space, because he told us he wanted to go up into space. So in other words, I only had good feelings for him, and still now I'm just neutral. But they have roles too with their families on social media. Oh, but I was reacting because you were like that. They don't go into the subjects legitimately. So when you go into subjects legitimately, people change your fake where you say they start showing they have their collusions, and they start confessing things that way too. And that's why one of the big problems. But then the interbranch jumps in, because then they have to hide what their roles with it. They already had collusions with the breaching method used. One of the things that ties to the people who are interstates that I noticed recorded various ways, hyper evidentially recorded, a hyper forensics trail, so to speak. I'm not even forensics or police or a lawyer. The World Trade Center next to it, and a court next to it. Long term before it, all locations /S this breaching method has. Suits and ties, counters, exceptions, and counters, all one array, with defenses of themselves. Self-valuing criminally foreign influence, fact, human nature, quality aspects in nature as criminal insidious relative to being criminally foreign influence / hyper criminally foreign influence and pretending other. In other words, more so than what you do for your country, is what you allow said for it. Because we have had fact, human nature fakes. This is why there's a witch trials place next to Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum. While simultaneously, then and now, still the descriptions of it are tactically ulterior from what our founders left declassified to be communicated for our founding locations. Not just that one. Boxing is fun, one way, in many pray. And there is one way to fight where everybody wins at the same time, even those who lose, or else we sense. And we realize that we made positives, criminal and seditious natures of positive out of negative with our syntax agreements. And we are shown by nature, by doing that, how to make hyper positive out of negative. We are shown the difference of it. Therefore, so to speak, hyper positive and criminal and seditious natures of positive. And this is also relative to the Trinity, those three identities of relationship to itself. That identity of value progression generating species bodies has. And it is functional that way. Many pray.